The hotel shuttle hummed as it dropped me off at the Ambassador Hotel, its elegant face at a stark contrast to the turmoil churning inside me. I'm Lisa Weston, a nurse who'd spent the last 6 weeks in Colombia with Doctors Without Borders, entangled in an affair with Nate, a colleague whose charm had long since curdled into something sore. I stepped into the lobby, heart thudding with a fragile hope of finding Jack, my husband of over 2 decades, waiting to reclaim what we'd built. A marriage I'd fractured with my choices. 6 weeks ago, his voice had crackled through a phone call, raw with fury, as I lay beside Nate in a Bogota hotel bed, and since then, silence had swallowed us. I'd sent photos of Montserrat's peaks, hoping to bridge the gap, but his lack of reply gnawed at me. Now back home, I longed to rekindle our love, to erase the stain of my betrayal with the comfort of his familiar embrace. I'd ended things with Nate at the airport, his indifference a cold slap, and convinced myself Jack might have found solace with our neighbor Carla during my absence. A hall pass I'd tacitly offered. But as I crossed the polished marble toward the front desk, scanning for his broad shoulders, a sinking dread whispered he wasn't there. What I didn't know then was that Jack hadn't just drifted. He'd dismantled our life, leaving me to face the wreckage of my own making. The shuttle's engine faded as I stepped onto the curb, the Ambassador Hotel rising before me like a monument to a life I'd left behind. 6 weeks in Colombia had stretched into an eternity. Days filled with surgeries in makeshift clinics, nights lost in Nate's arms, a reckless escape from the quiet strains of my marriage to Jack. The lobby welcomed me with its plush chairs and gleaming brass doors, a bellboy loading my bags onto a cart with a polite nod. "Welcome, Mom," and a doorman tipping his hat as I passed. I moved toward the front desk, my steps slow, eyes darting across the sprawling space, searching for Jack's familiar frame. I'd written him before leaving Bogota, asking him to meet me here. Picturing his reluctant smile as we'd fall into each other's arms, the past 6 weeks a shadow we'd banished together. But he wasn't there. No broad shoulders leaning against a sofa, no quiet gaze catching mine. The upholstered chairs cradled strangers, their murmurs a soft hum beneath the chandelier's glow, and a pang of unease twisted in my gut. 6 weeks ago, his voice had erupted through a phone call. Sharp, wounded. As I lay tangled in Nate's sheets, the air thick with guilt. "How could you?" He'd spat, and I'd stammered, caught before the line went dead. Since then, nothing. No replies to the photos I'd texted of Montserrat's jagged peaks, no calls to bridge the silence. I'd clung to hope, telling myself his anger would fade, that our 20 years together could weather this storm. Now, standing in this pristine lobby, that hope felt flimsy, a thread fraying under the weight of what I'd done. I'd ended it with Nate at the airport, his shrug a final dismissal. But the relief was fleeting, overshadowed by the gnawing fear of what awaited me with Jack. My fingers tightened around my purse strap, the bellboy trailing at a respectful distance, as I approached the desk, still scanning, still praying he'd appear. The memory of that phone call haunted me as I crossed the lobby, each step a reminder of the fracture I'd carved into our marriage. It was 3 weeks into Colombia, the hotel room in Bogota dim with evening light, Nate's breath warm against my neck as we lay entwined. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, Jack's name flashing, and I answered, heart lurching. "Hey, honey." His voice came through, tight and trembling. "Where are you?" I faltered, Nate's arm tightening around me, and before I could lie, Jack cut in. "I hear him, Lisa. Who's with you?" The air sucked out of the room, my stammered excuses drowned by his roar. "How could you do this?" Nate smirked beside me unfazed, as Jack's words turned to static, then silence, the call ending with a click that echoed in my skull. I'd stared at the phone, hands shaking, guilt flooding me like a tide. He'd caught me. Raw, undeniable, and I'd offered nothing but weak deflections, too stunned to beg forgiveness. After that, I'd sent photos. Montserrat's misty cliffs, a shaky attempt to reach him, but no reply came, each unanswered text a stone sinking in my chest. I told myself he'd cool off, that his love would outlast his rage, but the silence stretched, a chasm I couldn't cross. Now, in the ambassador's lobby, that call replayed, his hurt, my betrayal, a wound I'd inflicted. Festering in the weeks since. I'd ended things with Nate, but Jack's voice lingered, a storm I couldn't outrun, and as I neared the desk, the absence of his presence sharpened my fear. Had I pushed him too far? The thought clawed at me, a quiet dread that this hotel might not be the reunion I'd dreamed of, but the edge of something darker. The lobby's soft hum faded as I approached the desk, my mind spinning with the plan I'd crafted in Colombia. I'd given Jack a hall pass, unspoken assumed, figuring 6 weeks apart might ease the strain of my absence. Carla, our neighbor, was the perfect candidate, a swinger with an effortless allure, her curves turning heads in our quiet suburb. I'd seen men gape as she sauntered by, her confidence a magnet, and she'd made no secret of her interest in Jack. Her suggestive glances over backyard barbecues, her purr of, "He's wasted on monogamy." I'd convinced myself he'd indulged, that Carla had rocked his world while I was gone. A fair trade for my fling with Nate. I hoped he'd enjoyed it, a brief escape, but I wanted it to end now. No more Carla, no more open doors. Just us rebuilding what I'd cracked. Standing there, I pictured them together, her laughter filling our kitchen, his hands on her, a release I'd sanctioned in my mind. It didn't sting, it felt like balance. A ledger evened out. I'd told myself he'd see it that way too, that we'd laugh about it later, stronger for it. But as I scanned the lobby, his absence gnawed at me. No sign of the man I'd left free to roam, no trace of the reunion I'd scripted. Had he taken Carla too far, tangled in her web beyond my intent? The thought flickered, then dimmed. I trusted his heart, his loyalty, even if I'd tested it. I wanted him back, whole mind, the hall pass revoked with my return. The desk loomed closer, and I steeled myself, clinging to the belief that Jack's love would outshine any dalliance, that we'd mend this together. If only he'd show up. Nate's shadow loomed as I stood in the lobby, a bitter taste rising at the memory of our 6 weeks. At first, he'd been a thrill. His sharp jaw, his surgeon's hands, a spark that lit up Columbia's long days. But the shine dulled fast. In bed, he turned demanding, pushing me past comfort with a smirk. "Try this, Lisa." His voice a taunt, not a tease. When Jack's call exposed us, Nate's arrogance flared. He'd mock Jack, sneering. "Who's better, me or that little man of yours?" Forcing me to answer, his eyes gleaming as I choked out lies. "Mine's bigger," he'd gloat, demeaning Jack's manhood, our marriage me, until the words that once revved me up soured into disgust. I'd begged him to stop. "Enough, Nate." But he'd doubled down, painting Jack as a pathetic fool who'd bow to him, servant in his twisted fantasy. By the end, at Bogota's airport, I saw him clear. Narcissistic, cold, a man who'd used me as a toy. "It's over," I'd said, voice firm, and he'd shrug. "Getting tired of you anyway. Enjoy your broken husband." His indifference cut, but it freed me, stripping away the haze I'd lived in. Standing there, luggage at my feet, I compared. Nate's technical skill lacked soul, his touch hollow against Jack's warmth, the love I'd traded for a fling. Relief washed over me as I boarded the plane. Nate swapping seats to avoid me, a petty last jab I didn't care to dodge. Now, in the ambassador's glow, that clarity sharpened. I'd been a fool, but I'd woken up, yearning for Jack's steady heart, praying it wasn't too late to reclaim it. The flight home blurred into a haze, my seat beside Sarah a quiet refuge after Nate's exit. She'd been my shadow in Colombia. Another nurse, another affair, her laughter hiding her own guilt. At the airport, as we waited for luggage, a young woman approached. "Are you Sarah Washington?" and handed her a manila envelope. Sarah's Wes faltered as the woman chirped. "You've been served. Have a nice day." Snapping a photo before vanishing. Sarah's face crumpled, the envelope trembling in her hands as she tore it open. Divorce papers from Josh, her husband, the words stark against the page. She collapsed into sobs, a raw, guttural sound that drew eyes, her body shaking as I knelt beside her. "Sarah," she gasped. Jack told him. He knew I was with someone, but he didn't tell Josh until now. My stomach dropped. Jack had known about her too, a secret he'd held until it suited him. I rubbed her back, murmuring, "It'll be okay," but the lie stuck in my throat. Her calls to Josh went unanswered, blocked, and the group around us offered hollow comfort. "Maybe he'll forgive you." Knowing full well her marriage was ash, I watched, heart pounding, as she gathered her bags, fleeing to her parents in an Uber, her world unraveling in minutes. My own fears spiked. Would a process server find me next? No envelope came, no photo snapped, and I exhaled, clinging to the thin hope Jack's silence meant mercy. But Sarah's ruin lingered, a mirror to what I might face. A warning I couldn't shake as I headed to the hotel, praying my story wouldn't end the same. The ambassador's lobby stretched wide as I reached the front desk. The young Clermez, Joe's badge red, flashing a dazzling smile. "Welcome," he said, fingers poised over his keyboard. "Lisa Weston." I scanned the room again. Still no Jack, no familiar silhouette. An unease crept deeper. "One night," I confirmed, handing over my visa, expecting Jack to join me soon, his absence a puzzle I couldn't solve. Joe swiped it, frowned. "I'm sorry, it's declined." My breath hitched. A glitch, surely. I'd barely used it in Colombia, the group covering costs, Nate picking up tabs. "Try this," I said, sliding my Discover card, my only other one, left safe in Bogota's hotel vault. He swiped again, his frown deepening. "This one's declined too." The air thickened, a pit forming in my stomach as a couple behind me shifted impatiently. "Those are all I have," I stammered, heat rising to my cheeks. "I've been abroad 6 weeks. Something's wrong." Joe's politeness held. "Let me know if I can help." But I stepped aside, flustered, the bellboy abandoning my cart for the next guests. I fumbled for my phone, turned off since the flight, and powered it on. No messages, a blank slate that chilled me. I dialed Jack, heart thudding, but a robotic voice cut in. "This number is disconnected." My hand dropped, the lobby spinning. Disconnected. Panic clawed up my throat. Had he canceled the cards? Changed his number? The pieces didn't fit, but the dread solidified. Something was terribly wrong, and Jack wasn't just absent. He'd moved against me, a shadow I couldn't yet see. The lobby's hum faded as I sank into a chair, phone limp in my hand, Jack's disconnected number a silent scream. A man approached. Tall, suited, his face vaguely familiar from earlier glances. "Are you Lisa Weston?" My pulse spiked. Sarah's airport collapse flashing through me. "Yes," I croaked, fear tightening my chest. "Something from your husband," he said, handing me a thick manila envelope, his tone neutral. "Have a nice day," he added, turning away. "No, you've been served." No photo snapped, unlike Sarah's fate. I exhaled, a flicker of relief, maybe a surprise, a gesture. But my hands trembled as I gripped it, the weight heavy with possibility. I stumbled to a nearby seat, the upholstered cushion soft against my fraying nerves, and tore it open. A typed letter slid out, crisp and formal, alongside a smaller envelope. My eyes darted over Jack's words. "Lisa, your flagrant disregard for our marriage broke my heart." And my breath caught, the room tilting as his pain spilled across the page. He hadn't slept with Carla, hadn't taken my hall pass, only kissed Deidre once in Iraq, a moment of weakness after an ambush. But he knew everything. Nate, the Red Roof Inn fling years ago, tracked by a PI he'd hired. He'd sold our house, our cars, drained our accounts, canceled my cards. All with a power of attorney I'd forgotten I'd signed. A DAF 100 Visa gift card clinked from the smaller envelope, a bitter token. My hands shook, tears blurring the ink. Hope shattered, replaced by a dawning horror of what he'd done, a reckoning I hadn't seen coming. Love this twist. I'd be thrilled if you'd share, or drop a comment below to keep the story alive. Jack's letter burned in my hands, each word a shard slicing through the haze I'd lived in. "I never touched Carla," he wrote, his tone cold, deliberate. "The thought of you gifting her to me turned my stomach. My hall pass, my grand gesture, had been a misfire." He'd rejected it, hosting her and her husband Vincent for dinner instead, where they'd revealed my affair with Nate long before that phone call. "Leslie thought you'd told me," he scrawled. "They don't condone cheating in their open marriage rules." Shame flooded me. I'd misjudged them all, painting Jack as the swinger I'd become. He'd kissed Deidre once in Iraq, post-ambush adrenaline blurring lines, but stopped short. "You're the only woman I've been with in 20 years. I couldn't say the same, and he knew it. He'd uncovered more. The Red Roof Inn, when he was in Korea, a PI catching my early arrivals before shifts. He'd forgiven it then, discreet as it was, but Nate broke him. Using my forgotten POA, he'd sold our house to a young couple, our cars to dealers, emptied our accounts. "Wouldn't want some jerk taking advantage of you," he mocked. He'd shredded the POA after, a one-time blade he'd wielded with precision. My throat closed as I read. Our life, torched by my own hand, rebuilt by his. You changed our rules, he wrote. I liked this unilateral game. The DAW 500 gift card mocked me, a pittance against the ruin he'd crafted, and I sat there, envelope trembling, the depth of his hurt and his vengeance sinking in like a slow, cold tide. The letter unfolded further. Jack's words a relentless march through the ashes of our life. I burned it all, he wrote. Our wedding photos, my dress, snapshots of us, a bonfire in our backyard that smoked so thick Ralph next door checked in. Sold the furniture, my tools, donated your clothes, everything's gone. My breath hitched, 20 years reduced to cinders and cash. He'd swapped his phone. Cancelled our plan. Don't have my new number handy, might send it someday. And planned a year-long RV trip, roaming the country, untethered. No divorce, he added. I won't remarry. Just leaving. My chest ached. Picturing him driving off, free, while I sat stranded. He'd hired a PI in Colombia. Photos, audio of me with Nate. Damning proof he'd sent to families, coworkers. CCing me on an email I hadn't yet seen. Shared it with HR, he wrote. Delivered Monday. Hospital might like your morals clause breached. My job. Gone. Like the house, the cars, the accounts he'd drained, cash fueling his escape. Told the kids about your affairs, he continued. They're sad but get it. I'll update them. They won't give you my number. Tears spilled, hot and silent. I'd lost them too, their trust charred in his fire. The lobby blurred. His plan a meticulous unraveling of everything we'd built, leaving me with nothing but a gift card and the echo of his final line. Enjoy your open relationship. He'd taken my betrayal and turned it into his exodus. A vanishing act that left me hollow, clutching the ruins of a life I'd thought I could reclaim. The envelope slipped to my lap. Jack's letter a weight I couldn't shed as the lobby's chatter faded into a distant hum. My cards. Dead. My phone. No messages. Jack's number gone. A void where his voice should have been. The email he'd sent. Photos of me and Nate, my shame broadcast to family, friends, coworkers. Sat unopened. A bomb I couldn't face. HR had those pictures now, his courier set for Monday. My nursing job, my anchor, would vanish. The hospital's moral code, my news. The house, sold. Cars, gone. Counts, emptied. All I had was 500 on a gift card, a cruel jest in a wallet stripped bare. I sat, adrift in the ambassador's plush chair. The bellboy's cart long since claimed by others. My bags a silent testament to my isolation. Sarah's sobs echoed in my mind. Her marriage shattered at the airport, a mirror to my unraveling. Jack hadn't served me papers, but he'd served justice. Cold, complete, leaving me no home to return to, no voice to call. The kids knew. Their silence a wall I couldn't breach. Friends, colleagues. Their inboxes held my disgrace, Jack's revenge a public execution of my dignity. I pressed my hands to my face, tears seeping through, the lobby's elegance mocking my collapse. I'd chased Nate's thrill, convinced myself Jack would bend, but he'd broken us instead, walking away with everything while I sat here alone, the cost of my choices a tide pulling me under. The future loomed. Empty, unmoored. And I wondered how I'd ever thought I could come back to this, to him, unscathed. The ambassador's lobby stretched around me as I sat. Jack's letter crumpled in my lap, a testament to the day I'd returned, brimming with hope to mend our love, only to find he'd raised it all, because of my betrayal with Nate. If you shatter the trust of someone who's given you everything, don't be shocked when they strike back, like I did, straying for 6 weeks, only to have Jack erase our life in return. Choices carry weight. See the fallout before you leap. Cherish loyalty when it's yours. Rebuild from the ruins if you can. I danced with Nate's arrogance, traded Jack's steady heart for a hollow thrill, and woke too late to the price. House gone, job lost, family fractured, left with a DAW 500 card and a silence that deafens. Jack's retribution taught me what I couldn't see. Trust is fragile, and once broken, it can burn you clean. I sit here, lesson carved in loss, knowing now the value of what I had, hoping you'll hold yours tighter than I did. Enjoyed this journey. I'd love for you to like, share, or comment below. Let's keep the conversation going.